Stream is up in 5, 4, 3, 2. And we're live from an all-new, undisclosed location somewhere in Northeast Ohio. I'm Josh McClay, a.k.a. Omally of O'Malley's Adventure. That's James Haavisto, mayoral candidate for the city of Massillon, and this is Omally Live. I want to thank everybody for joining, whether you're watching live or in post. Come on. The number to contact the show is 330-809-1924, or you can email us at o'malleysAdventure@yahoo.com. Thanks for being on the show.
Hey, it's my pleasure, Josh. Thanks for having me.
So, for those who don't know, James is running for the mayoral slot for the city of Massillon, and he has a lot of great ideas, I think. But let's get a little background on
Sure.
Who you are, where you're from, your background, where you're from originally.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, there's this little cabin way out in the prairie. No, that has nothing. No, that is not. No, I was actually born and raised I was born in Willoughby, Ohio, Eastlake, Ohio, just 20 miles east of Cleveland. And so I was born and raised there, lived there for 18 years of my life. Basic childhood, nothing super spectacular there, but great parents.
Right.
My father was a steel hauler out of Cleveland, was a truck driver, owner-operator.
Okay.
So I guess that's a little bit of where we'll see down the road where I get my entrepreneurial spirit from.
Gotcha.
And my mother was a homemaker, and there were 9 children in the family.
Big family.
They were going for 15, but the doctor finally told my mom, stop. I was the second to the youngest.
Oh, wow.
And so she was going for 15. She was always disappointed she didn't make it to 15 children. So,
Well, they say if you're going to have a family, have a big one.
absolutely.
And
It was interesting.
Yeah.
7 boys and 2 girls.
wow.
So
My
that was,
goodness.
But and all that. So that kept the truck driver wheels rolling,
Right.
to support that family. But it was quite interesting actually growing up.
So did you go to school up there? Or?
I did. I graduated in 1981 from Eastlake North High School. The reason I say Eastlake, of course, there's a large one in Akron that a lot of people talk about.
Right.
But I was graduated to Willoughby Eastlake school system. So my entire family is public school educated, and
Right.
I happen to be although a lot of ways I'm conservative of the financial side, because a lot of people want to know, is he conservative? Is he liberal? What is he?
Right.
When it comes to finances, I'm an extreme conservative.
Oh, gotcha.
But I am a big public school advocate. Love public school. I
Right.
think it's the greatest thing our nation has come up with.
Right.
And we got a lot of work to do on it.
Absolutely.
But it's an awesome opportunity our country has.
I tend to lean. People ask me that. Well, are you conservative or are you liberal? I said fiscally, I'm conservative. Socially, I'm more libertarian.
Right. I mean,
And I think with our school system, for sure, I think it could be one of the greatest systems on the planet. I think.
Absolutely.
But I think we've made some errors along the way, and fixing them. Well, I mean, we're kind of seeing it now in Massillon a little bit. Our schools need some attention. So, college,
did not go to college.
outstanding.
I am not. I am a strong advocate of find your groove, find what you do, and be the best at it.
Absolutely.
If that is college, I don't want somebody poking around in my brain operating that does not have a college degree. Don't get me wrong.
Right. I'm with you.
However, I don't want anyone, I am just heartbroken and torn when I see people look at young people and say you must go to college.
Right. Absolutely. That my middle son went to Notre Dame College up in Cleveland on a wrestling scholarship.
Sure.
And my youngest, he was getting ready to graduate, and he said, "Well, I haven't went to college." I said, "He went for free." I said, "There's a big difference." I said, "You're going to go there for 4 or 5 years and come out with 6 digits worth of debt. You might want to think that one through." I think college has a place, but I don't believe in the debt that some think that they have to have
Absolutely.
to come out and have some type of career or whatnot. Because with Ivan, he went to be a history teacher, and when you look at their tuition and whatnot, it works out to a little over $200,000.
Sure.
Who spends $200,000 to make $45,000 a year?
Right.
That's not smart.
It's not good finances,
No.
and I'm all about freedom.
Right.
And if we're going to be about freedom, I don't want to teach a young person, especially, hey, you know what? You can be free, but why don't you start out in the slavery of debt?
Right. Absolutely.
And guess what? And I hope you get a job that'll help you pay that debt. But you know what? We want to make sure it's easy and you can get to college.
Absolutely.
Big mistake.
Right.
We might be jumping pretty far into this
Right.
to this conversation,
Yeah. Right.
but
Yeah.
so yeah, let's jump back. And so I graduated in 1981 from Eastlake
Right.
North High School. On the night of my commencement, I was actually packing my 1975 Ford Custom 500
Oh, my.
automobile that was repainted my police car from Eastlake, Ohio that had been retired. And so during my senior year in school, they used to call it the tank because we actually riveted the steel quarter panels on the back and remolded all that. And fortunately, I come from a family of pretty handy guys. My father was an incredible inventor and could fix a lot of problems.
Right.
Owned a gas station at one time as well as being a truck driver and so on.
Right.
So I took that senior year and actually rebuilt that car, the body of that car, and packed that car up and moved to Springfield, Missouri. I went the next day into the high school, and my principal said, Jim, why wouldn't you come to your commencement? He said, that is the biggest night of your life. And I looked at my principal. I said, I appreciate the years here, but no, it is not. My biggest days are still coming. And he looked at me and he said, I suppose you're right. And he handed me my diploma. I picked it up at the office, put it in my car, and I took off for Springfield, Missouri, where I had a sister and brother-in-law that lived down there. They had gone to Bible college, met, and got married.
Right.
So I moved in with them just a few days after my graduation.
So what did you move down there to do? Just
I
spread
wanted
your
to
wings and
That's exactly right. Let's see what comes next. I had a very nice job with the Abood family. They owned a Value King store in Eastlake, Ohio.
Yeah.
And I had worked gainfully before that since I was 9 years old, cutting grass and being a janitor of a shop and then working in grocery and gas stations and so on. But long story short, at that point I was like, let me see what this is all about out here. I'm not going to college, but I'm going to see what I can find. So I moved in with my brother-in-law and sister, and there was no laziness at any level in our family.
Right.
I immediately hit the trail putting in applications. It was kind of nice to be back in the day
Right.
where you didn't have to go on a computer and hope someone would see your application come across. And I landed a little part-time job in 5 days after arriving in Springfield, Missouri, at a little place called Walmart Stores Incorporated. That was back when they had, I believe they had roughly 375 stores at that time.
wow.
And Springfield, Missouri was the first city they ever tried their theory of circulating, surrounding a city. So they had a store at every major entrance to Springfield, Missouri, the college town. And
Gotcha.
so I got a job in their store. Long story short, they were a great company to work for. That was back in the days when Sam Walton was still alive and would stop in the stores and so on. But I started loading trucks for them, and just within a matter of a few days, they said, wait a minute, we don't want you part-time, we want you full-time.
Right.
And again, thank heavens to parents that put a work ethic into us and helped develop that at the younger years.
Sure.
And it was full-time, and within a year, I'd been accepted into their management training program.
Right.
So that was a fast forward for a quick year there, but what an education working for Walmart
Right.
and able to apply the things I had learned as a youth.
Wow. That's you know what? When even as early as 91, 92, I had friends that were from Kansas, and they were like, "You guys don't have a Walmart in your town?" I was like, "What's a Walmart?" So that whole
They had
company spread pretty much from the center out.
right, and they had nothing. I think it was north of the Mason-Dixon line.
Right.
They just didn't concentrate on that. So while they were expanding, one of the cool things they did, they bought out a company called Coons Big K,
Yeah.
which was in the southeast United States. So that literally gave them coverage pretty much across the southern belt of the United States.
Right.
And then by the time I left in a year, they were up to, I believe, it was 600 stores. Wow. So it was that fast of a growth pattern. So, but interesting things you learn from companies like that.
Absolutely. So it says, I hope I'm pronouncing this right. This is the one that has my attention. Citrain?
Citrain. Like science and training.
Yeah.
Is how they came about that. Advance on, there's a lot of resume in there because, first of all, I didn't go to college.
Right.
But I love to learn.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you, how you moved into that type of work without without a degree, because most places wouldn't.
Yeah, and we dealt with the owner of the company is a good friend of mine still to this day. Lives in Massillon. His company was once located in downtown Massillon, but for some reasons we can talk about later, they just didn't stay there. They moved up to Bella Village and the Glass Towers now.
Gotcha.
But when they were in Massillon, I did work for them. But how we got to Sci-Train without covering everything in between, which there's a lot there, it's just a matter, again, it falls into line with this. We don't have to pour college, we don't have to pour debt on our young people or on anyone. We can tell them there are other ways to train, there are other ways to learn.
Right.
And so through the course of different management and sales jobs and so on, let me just touch real quick, pre-Sci-Train, I had developed, I had come back, by the way, after a year. I got a call from the gentleman I worked for in high school in Eastlake. And he said, listen, Jim, I just bought a grocery store, which was the old Value King on Wales Road in Massillon.
Yeah.
He said, I just bought a grocery store in Massillon. He said, if you would do it, I would like for you to come back and be the store manager of that entire store with me. And we'll co-manage it. And of course, at 18 years old, I mean, I'm on it. I told Walmart, thank you for the training for a year.
Right.
And Walmart said, hey, you're in the management program. You decide. I said, no, I think this is an opportunity I need to take. So I moved to Massillon, Ohio in 1982. It was Jackson Township. Now it's within the city limits where the store was.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to have the experience, the hard work ethic, and to be able to learn from great people along the way, including my owners at the supermarket. There were 40 employees in that store, and here I was 18 years old managing an operation.
Right.
You know, thousands and thousands of dollars a year with 40 employees.
Right.
So you don't get a lot of opportunities like that early in life.
No, and some people would be overwhelmed with that type of responsibility. So that does say something to your upbringing as far as, you know, taking a challenge like that and saying, yes, I can do that at that age, because just saying most 18, 19-year-olds today probably wouldn't be that ambitious.
Well, I hear, and I'm going to relate a lot of what I say to politicians, because I've followed politics for a lot of years, a lot on the national level. And I started but even in the last decade, I've started paying more and more attention to them. And I hear them saying, but these are just kids, and they're not, and I'm like, they're 26 years old. By God. I had 2 children by then. Yeah. I had a family, and I'm not the standard. That's not the point.
Right.
Stop telling them they're kids and they're not responsible for what they do.
Exactly.
The best thing we can do for our kids is teach them as young as possible. Take on responsibility.
Sure.
Start doing something. Clean your room.
Yep.
That's something.
Good place to start.
And I'm getting way off base here, Josh, but I'll tell you what,
good.
Sometimes when I start thinking about politicians, I get a little shook up.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But, I came back to Massillon. I managed that store, but through the course of the years, I had great careers and opportunities to do into sales and so on. Previous to Sci-Train, which is what you asked me about, I was told I worked for a food vending company in North Canton, and they were pretty much a state powerhouse in the state of Ohio. And somebody told me, they said, you'll never, I left that job. They said, you'll never. Matter of fact, let me correct that. I didn't leave that job. I worked for them for 4.5 years. They got a new general manager in, and he found out I was doing some small vending machines on the side because I was always some type of an entrepreneur.
Right.
And the current administration was completely happy with that and said, these are not accounts we would take, so why shouldn't you have them?
Right.
New management comes in. Within a few months, they found out a way to fire me.
Right.
So I was going to protect them for a minute, but they're not in business anymore anyway. So, so I was actually fired, and within a few months, that manager came back to me. I took a job at Montgomery Ward selling appliances. He came back to me, and he said, Jim, he said, you did it again. You landed on your feet. He said, I'm sorry I fired you. He said, but he said, I realize you're doing much better. Well, he was right, because I had quadrupled my salary. Right. From that job to the new one. Right. And it was just one of those things in life. It's just life throws you curves.
Right. And you adjust.
And you just keep pushing forward and keep pushing forward.
Absolutely.
So, but anyway, so they said, long story short, through a lot of that, they said, you'll never get a job selling for one of these food vending companies. Would you believe that same company hired me back 10 years later and quadrupled my salary again?
Nice.
in sales. And what had happened was I worked for a competitor of theirs in sales, and I took their second most profitable account in all of Northeast Ohio.
Right.
And he said, there's no way you could do that. He said, that's just not done. And they laid everything on the table in defense of it and so on. And the client that we picked up in Solon, Ohio, he just said no. This guy came in, presented his case, showed us where our problems were, told us how we'd solve them, and we hired him, and we're sticking with him no matter what free stuff or how many thousands of dollars you offer us. We've changed. That company recruited me and hired me in sales, and so I began selling for them. And that was the one they said you'll never get without a college degree. And I was their first salesman ever without a college degree. But so that was a course. I'm just and I apologize if I'm dragging that out.
No.
But jump ahead to a company like SciTrain.
Right.
At this point, I was working in Massillon, Ohio, downtown, and I had my own insurance agency.
Okay.
So I had an office where the new Shears corporate headquarters is now.
Right.
I had an office right there. They were in the same building on another floor. And so through the course of talking with the owner and so on and having met him years ago, casually, eventually he convinced me to come to work for them selling, and he could care less about the college education.
Right.
And I always admire him, and I'm humbled, not bragging, I'm humbled, because he said, we do business all over the world. He said, first of all, you could go to Germany and sell like a machine. He said the German people would love you because of my straightforward, blunt approach.
Right.
And he said, but we'd like for you to sell here. So I did sell for SciTrain. And again, we sold the scientific assessment and development centers, and would evaluate folks that wanted to be directors and CEOs of corporation. I didn't do the evaluation. I sold the programs.
Right.
And then they would come in and be observed by PhDs and peers, and they would they would give them feedback. And that's how they would know how to train, how to develop what they needed to do over the next 3 to 5 years of their life. So that was a big deal for that.
Right, right. So when companies approach you with something like that, so start to finish, company X comes to you, how long does it take for them to implement something like that?
It can't when they look at the program itself.
Right.
It can be any length of time, of course, like any other sales. Some companies, you can talk to them time and time and time again,
right,
and they'll stretch it out over years. So that can be years to sell. Then there are other companies that are literally ready to go,
right,
that have seen the program, or they've experienced, or they've finally gotten to that point where their program matches what our program could provide.
Right.
So, for instance, we did a global company in Columbus. And we met with the CEO one afternoon. I'll never forget. We met him at the airport in Columbus, and he flew in his Phantom fighter from World War II. He owned one, and he flew in. He lived on one of the East Coast companies. I don't give too much information away, but he flew in. We met him there and so on. And I'll never forget. He was an old military guy, and we had a 3.5-day program out for him. He's like, I want something bigger, something tougher. I want this to be the toughest program we've ever. I want these people to sweat. This is not a vacation. And so he said, I want a 5-day program. And I said, I can tell you one thing. You're not going to get a 5-day program for the kind of money we have laying on the table right now. It's going to cost you a lot more.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, who's this guy, the finance guy? And the owner of the company said, he's the salesman. He knows. But just being able to have that kind of rapport quickly with a CEO we've just met, and he respected that. They paid the price, paid the full price. That was the largest sale that company had since they've been operating in the United States, that individual sale. Wow. So it's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
It's just fun opportunities that have come up, and we've been fortunate to be able to close those.
Are you still in contact with them, or do you? With
the
company itself?
The company itself, I don't contact them, but SciTrain, yes. The owner is he's a friend of mine to this day.
Gotcha.
And matter of fact, we just met a few weeks ago and talked about it. I explained to him about running for mayor and so on.
Right.
He actually lives in Massillon.
Wow.
So we're excited about that.
Yeah. Moving on to what year did you come to Massillon?
1982.
82.
Summer of 82.
So between then and now, what made you decide that coming into the politics would be sort of the direction you wanted to head? Is there any one thing?
There is a big influence in that. And again, I have followed politics for years. I've been very interested in national politics.
Right.
Of course, my first vote was ever cast for president was for the re-election of Ronald Reagan.
Right.
And I believe he probably was it was fortunate at my age, he was the biggest influence in my life as far as politics go,
Right.
because he gave a message. It was common sense. It was about hard work. It was about making things better for yourself first
Right.
before you ask the government and so on. So that was a big impact. But as we move through, I mean, business was always my thing. I could work hard, make anything as big as I wanted to, or I could back off. Right now, I run a hot dog cart
Right.
over on the southwest side, outside of the city limits of Canton.
Right.
But all those things I've learned and seen over the years, including in my own business, they always tied in some way. There was some government interaction in that.
Right.
For instance, why do I sit outside of the city limits of Canton? Well, because back in 2011,
Right.
I wanted to put a hot dog cart in downtown Canton and see how it did, because it just seemed like hot dog carts were in all the major cities. Why don't we have any food vendors?
Right.
I tried to put one down there. Went down to a couple special events, pulled it off, and just took heat. Talk about people glaring and getting mad about this little hot dog cart selling hot dogs on their first Fridays. And
So-
they were like, no, we don't want you here. You don't understand. This is for the brick and mortar restaurants, the people that invest in this town. I said, how do you think small business starts? I said, I'm looking around here at these buildings, and they thought I was a nut.
Right.
I said, it seems to me like you guys might need small business people
Right.
to help get this thing going. But they actually forced us out of First Fridays. Canton, I went down and spoke at council.
Right.
They put a ban in on food vendors downtown in the Special Improvement District, which is most of downtown.
Right.
So it was illegal. All of a sudden, a small business person was an outlaw in Canton. If you went to the street and tried to sell a hot dog, you were an outlaw. Think about that concept.
That doesn't make sense. I'm not a fan of the over regulation of anything.
Right.
Like if you look at around this room, nothing in here is unregulated. At some point, everything in here, whether it was transported, whatnot. So to take a small business, and it's not like you were building atomic bombs, you were serving food. People eat. Why would something like that be so heavily regulated that they would say, no, we don't want you here?
Think about, we were talking about the political implications, how I got involved in politics, and that's one of many. Think about that. We want to talk about drug problems, young people that don't stay in this area. We want to talk about there's no opportunity. I can take a young person and say, listen, can you work a job and save $1,000? Do you think you could do that? Well, yeah. I can show you how to build a hot dog cart for $1,000.
Mm-hmm.
I've got the plans. I've got everything from another gentleman on the internet. I can show you how to get into business. Wouldn't that be better than being out here dealing drugs on the street or feeling useless in life? Well, sure. So he lives in the city of Canton. He builds a hot dog cart, and he wants to go sell a hot dog and start doing something with his life.
Right.
And it's not, I tell people, it's not about the hot dog itself. It's about the very concept like you talked about.
Right.
And so guess what? Wait a minute. I'm an outlaw because I sell hot dogs on the street. I'm willing to get health department licensed. I'm willing to do everything right.
Right.
They are. But I'm an outlaw. Why don't I just go sell drugs and make money?
Right.
I don't know.
Right. But we do. We live in a time where that's, and it's odd because most of this country was built. Any business that's big generally started small.
Absolutely.
So why would you stifle it?
We had, I think back to the time I met with attorney George Zangus down in Canton. I don't know if you remember the name. His partner just represented Massillon in the affinity deal and so on.
Gotcha.
And I don't know his partner that well. That's a whole other story there. But George Zangus, I sat down with him as a young man, and he said, Jim, he said, I'm going to tell you something, no charge. He said, you know what? Well, if you want to build a business, you yourself discipline yourself. If you want to sell hamburgers, you get a little cart. Isn't this interesting? Before I ever owned a food cart, decades before, he said, you get a little cart and you start selling hamburgers on a street corner. Then when those start selling and people find out you're putting out a good product and you have great customer service, then you build a trailer. And then after that, then you save up your money from that hamburger, and then you build a storefront and you put in a hamburger shop.
Mm-hmm.
And the concept was so simple, it was normal to talk that way 30 years ago.
Right.
Now it's normal to talk about, well, if you don't have the money to put in a storefront, we don't need you.
Right.
And that is absolutely the opposite of what our cities and our communities need, including Massillon.
Right. It's well. So let's talk a little bit about Massillon and some of the directions that they're heading as far as business goes. What do you see as far as a direction you want to head?
Okay.
As far as your candidacy goes.
A big part, and I may double back into some of the family now as I start talking about this, because there's some direct tie-ins. We've talked about education. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not.
Right.
We've talked about business. Maybe it's for you, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just being a great employee somewhere.
Right.
But as far as Massillon as a city, there is no greater power on earth, and our country has proven it, than free enterprise.
Yep.
And that is okay, somebody's going to get on Facebook and say, but we're not really free enterprise. Okay, save all that. I know we're not a pure republic. We're not a pure democracy. We're not a pure... I get all that.
Right.
It's not that we don't understand what we're talking about, but the concept of free market.
Right.
The one thing that can turn around Massillon is not an economic powerhouse. Massillon has been fading like the rest of Stark County for decades. And yeah, we admit that. But then what do? We continue to restrict, and we try to put buildings into land groups. We try to restrict how they can be developed. Massillon is in need of free market ideas. We don't need someone coming in and saying, listen, you know what? If we put all pretty awnings up downtown and make them all match and make all the storefronts look the same, the city's going to look cute. Okay, that may be. But in 10 years, that cute can be out of date. Right. That's why cities don't do that successfully over the long run.
Right.
What cities do is we look at individual landowners, we look at individual business owners, and if Jane wants to put up a shop that's pink with purple polka dots all over the front of her building, let Jane do that. Because you know what happens if Jane doesn't make money? Jane changes her mind and changes her marketing concept.
Right.
And I don't think that's a phenomenal, out of the ordinary thinking idea. Right. Let's let free market move. If somebody comes in with a coffee company in town, and they do a great job doing it,
right?
Guess what? You think there's going to be 3 more coffee shops pour in? Probably not.
Right.
That company's going to develop and grow until they falter or succeed, whichever way.
Right.
And then there's another free market solution.
Right.
And then somebody else comes in. Now there's a coffee shop. There's Jane's Purple with pink polka dots, or I think I got that backwards now. But but there's their shop, and all of a sudden they say, you know what would go really nice in here? A bakery would go nice in here. And they fill that shop.
Right.
And this is not, and every time I hear government officials and politicians, I sat next to one when I ran for state rep last year. And I sat there and I said, but we need small business entrepreneurial ideas. Mm-hmm. And the answer was, but I know how to get people tax money and grants. And I was dumbfounded.
Wow.
I was like, do we understand as a society what entrepreneurs and small business people do? They take something or nothing and create something out of it.
Right.
That's the fantastic idea behind of America. That's the fantastic idea of what can happen in Massillon. But we can't regulate all that. We have to allow it to happen.
Right. Well, I think a couple things there with the business. I don't know if anything ever came of that where they wanted to change or mandate the storefronts.
I think it was wisely shot down.
And Massillon doesn't have a lot of downtown business,
right,
to begin with, that stays around for very long. I would try to. You don't want to say give them the opportunity, because the government wouldn't give them the opportunity, but they should be able to make good decisions about their own property as far as how they want to market it with their storefront.
And it's unfortunate in Massillon. I mean, I know there's some underlying problems in Massillon with private owners that do control part of the real estate in Massillon,
right,
where they don't come through and help the entrepreneurs and so on develop a property, and they just kind of let it go on and rent it to the next guy and let it run down. So there are issues to deal with. I mean, it's not just click your fingers and it's done. I'm not naive enough not to realize that.
Right.
But entrepreneurs, again, they will find a way. They'll adjust. If this property is not working out, they may move down the road. and that entrepreneur will be successful down the road.
Absolutely.
And they're going to continue to cycle those buildings.
So let's talk a little bit more about. You talked about grants and taxes. So what's your view? Let's say in the next 5 years, you get elected. Where do you see the taxes going?
Well, when it comes to taxes, first of all, I think we like to sneak in, and I feel that way about it.
Right.
We like to sneak in levies and special taxes and so on. I would like to see our city. One thing I've stated very clearly: should I be elected to mayor, we will do a complete review of all penalties, fees, and taxes
Right.
that we're charging our citizens. I happen to disagree with, I believe it's the 0.20% tax, where if you live in Massillon and you work outside the city,
Right.
where you pay a penalty tax, in my opinion.
Right.
If you're in Canton paying 2.5% working there, you should not have to come back, pay that 2.5%, and still pay a 0.2%
Right.
tax, additional penalty tax for the privilege of living in Massillon.
Right.
I just think the concept is wrong. There are a few other cities that do that. I think Canal Fulton's one.
Right.
They are looking at repealing that. They understand that that's not fair taxation.
Yeah.
So condensing down taxation, let's find out let's bring that down to the lowest common denominator.
Right.
Perhaps that is a 2% permanent income tax. Those numbers have to be looked at.
Right.
I can't tell you to perfection what that number is.
Right.
But we've got to look at everything, put it down, and then we as a city have to understand that that is our budget
To
for
work with.
taxation to work with.
Right.
And then of course there are always state and federal grants for streets and highways and things like. There's other things involved there. We get that.
Right.
But that's very important. And another thing I think I really want to mention is the city has about $360,000, as I understand it, in a rainy day fund. And I have pushed, when I ran for state rep again,
Right.
I took a lot of heat from local governments saying, no, the state needs to have their rainy day fund. I don't care what the size of that is at this point.
Right.
Because that is for a specific purpose, for economic downturn, and that's why it's there.
Right.
And they're like, no, we need to dip into that. They're always wanting to dip in. But the problem is when they start dipping in, there are entities all over the state that want that money if you start dipping into it.
Sure.
But the city should learn from that, and our township should learn from that, and start developing a true $360,000 in an economic downturn is not going to save the city of Massillon.
No. No.
So there should be an allocated 0.5% or whatever that amount is that goes nothing but, that cannot be touched, that goes nothing but for saving us in a serious economic downturn.
So that's the tax side. What about the debt side? We have a good bit of debt. We currently have I believe the affinity thing, the way that it worked out is we're paying what, $6,800 a day.
A day, yes.
Which, if my math, that's like $200,000 a month. Some close. And I think erring to the side of caution, and I'm not a fan of debt. I would rather not have it.
Right.
To get rid of it. When you add something like that with a golf course, it's the boat anchor. I mean, it's a pretty heavy weight for a municipality to carry. So those two items, where would you see that going?
As far as debt, I am not a fan of debt.
Okay.
That comes with being this against the wall fiscal conservative.
Right.
My wife and I recently, and I'll tell you, we live it, and I'm just giving an example because you know what? People are like, how are you going to handle a budget of something that big? Well, I don't know. If I lay a $100 bill here on the table, or 100 ones, and I divide it up into a budget, and it's a percentage of that budget that goes to each thing, it's not much different than $1 million. It's just some extra zeros. So if you understand budgeting, you're going to understand running a city or a business or anything else.
Right.
So, but as far as the debt goes, Massillon is involved in a few things I just don't think government belongs involved in.
Okay.
And I'm going to just throw out some items to think about, because we're going to look at everything in my administration, not only taxation, but what has been draining those tax dollars to this
Right.
point. Because everybody says we don't have enough money to replace sewers, and politicians say we don't have enough money to replace sewers, to keep up with potholes, to keep up with bad roads, and so on. And to an extent, that may be true. But my question is, where is all the money going that we're getting in?
Right.
So I'm looking at there's been a lot of talk about over the years, and I think we all know it, that deal with Massillon about the golf course.
Right.
I would like to see us do something with that golf course. There are several ways we can go, but I am not a fan of public entities competing with private enterprise.
Right.
I don't know that I like the idea of Massillon being in the golf business.
Right.
And I don't like the idea of carrying debt. Whether they say that breaks even or not now, the debt is still being paid by the taxpayers.
Sure.
And that snowballs and affects everything else we do. Step into the hospital situation. Now, Affinity closed. That was a tragedy.
Right.
We can talk about whether people should have been involved in private lawsuits against Infinity that should have stepped into that that were public officials.
Right.
I don't think we should have, but this is not about personal attacks. I'm just saying I'm trying to lay out how we do business in Massillon.
Right.
And is it the best way? But then fast forward and we get a call and say they're closing. Now, first of all, we're shocked by this call. That means to me, coming from the sales and customer service background, that we have a very poor to no relationship with that employer in this
Sure.
case. And being one of our top 10 employers at that time, including union employees, that brings me some cause to
Right.
think about that, and it creates pause in me. Did we have the relationship, first of all?
Right.
Then as soon as they announce that they're closing, the next thing I hear is a lawsuit. And if you go back on my Facebook pages, I took a lot of heat for it. I said that is not how a municipality responds to a crisis with a private enterprise that is following the law.
Right.
So they brought the lawsuit.
Right.
Some of the state representatives wrote legislation targeting that hospital, and I don't want to rehash all the details of that. But again, I'm talking about a process of dealing with business and what that does for us in the future. So they bring a lawsuit against. They try to get Mike DeWine to file a lawsuit against them, which was ludicrous.
Right.
And they also wrote legislation specifically targeting this corporation when this corporation was already following the law.
Right.
Now, we may have had our feelings hurt.
Right.
We may have understood it was going to hurt us some economically, but we don't turn around and just sue.
Right.
Because that gives us a reputation that lasts. It takes a lifetime to build a good reputation. Anybody in business knows this.
Right.
Any person knows this.
Right.
And it takes a matter of a few poor steps to destroy all that reputation.
Absolutely.
And if I were a hospital operator looking at the way the city of Massillon in general handled this whole deal, I would not even consider a hospital in Massillon. That's just my opinion,
Right.
my observation as a business person.
Well, signaling down the road. I mean, why would you open a business like that in Massillon, knowing that if you do something they don't like, then the law is going to get involved? I'm not a fan of anything remotely close to that.
Absolutely.
To me, that it's almost, well, they talked about eminent domain. You know, I'm not a fan of that either. I think as bad as it was, finding somebody is different than suing someone to stay.
And then the result of the lawsuit was, and the comments were made back then, and my stand is still the same to this day, we got a hospital for $1. No, you did not. You got an empty building because, again, any business, when you look at selling a business, the day that business closes, its value drops to the bottom.
Right.
And there is not even close to the value the day before.
Sure.
So once that closed, they got a building for $1, and they had to know the expense it was going to take. We mentioned it before.
Right.
$6,800 a day
Sure.
on the taxpayer. Why couldn't we have worked with the hospital and said, listen, we'll help you sell that building. We'll do whatever we can. Keep the lights on. Keep it looking good.
Right.
And we'll do whatever we can to help you find a tenant or work with you. And I don't believe that ever had to be on the back of the taxpayers. And I will put a plug in for Altman Hospital in this one. Altman Hospital gifted us and saved our city and saved our taxpayers a pretty bad financial situation had they not donated to us or in the future.
And that's what I was going to say. That I'm not big on how hospitals work or how that whole process goes, but the way I see that, that's a gift. And here's why I say that. In 2008, Doctors Hospital closed. Nobody bought that and reopened it.
Right.
So you fast forward, and Affinity closes. No, nobody's going to open that. So for Altman to come in and sort of smooth that out, There were some people saying, well, now we can't open anything like that offers the same things that they do for, what, 5 years. Who are you going to find to do that?
Right.
And the only thing that I'm still waiting on is they said that after the legislation was done, they would discuss who the other offers were from.
Right.
I haven't heard that yet.
Well, there's parts of this whole deal that are not, let's say, not copacetic. We talked about originally there was 5 offers on the table.
Right.
That was way back when.
Sure.
Then there was 3 offers on the table. Now they've said, well, we've got to wait till Altman does this whole deal and pays us. Well, that's been stretched out.
Right.
And then we look at the first entity they tried to make a deal with city people on the board of the hospital and so on.
Right.
And I did sit and have a conversation for 2.5 hours. The gentleman arranged a meeting with myself and the mayor this past summer. Mm-hmm. And we sat and talked. And I said, I've got a question for you. Cardinal Health sits 2 hours away in Columbus, Ohio. They have a team that can come in for, I believe it's a cost of about $125,000. Again, it's pretty small compared to what we spend on a hospital already.
Sure.
I said they will come in, run an entire evaluation on that hospital. They will give you the recommendations whether it's feasible or not, and they will tell you the best 3 ways to proceed and what your specialty should be. And I asked the mayor directly, what experts did you use, or where is your report like this? Because there are other organizations that do it too.
Right.
She said, well, we had our experts. I said, but who were the experts that you used? And I am under the belief that there were no experts involved in this. The attorney from Canton is not an expert in running a hospital. So that is not your expert.
Right.
Because you are an RN or because you are a doctor does not mean you are an expert at running a medical facility.
Sure.
And even looking at the idea of who they initially looked at for the first team or first people to take it over, I made one phone call to a gentleman in finance with Akron General, and he works with Cleveland Clinic directly. And I said, hey, I've got a question for you. You've seen my Facebook post. You've seen what I've talked about here. I just want to make sure I'm not completely off track on this. He said, no, this is on track, and here's why. And he laid that out. And he said, by the way, I did some research for a few hours. The guys did some research. And here's the problem with these 2 gentlemen that are doing this. Here's their track record. And he said, there's no way they'll ever make this work. And here are the budgetary reasons why it will never work. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm a hot dog vendor on the southwest side of Canton. Mm-hmm. I made one phone call to a customer of mine, somebody I've met over the years that knows the industry. And I found out all this information. He spent 30 minutes explaining to me why it'll never work.
Right.
And I'm like, who are they talking to? Right. Who could possibly they be talking to that did not advise them not to take on this building? And I don't buy we had to control our destiny, because our destiny right now in that hospital, this is not over yet.
Right.
And I hope it turns out good. Nobody wants our city to hurt. That's not what I'm saying.
Right.
But our destiny is being drugged by the nose by that hospital. Right. And that has tied up our entire city for a year.
Sure.
And I'm concerned about that style of management.
Right. I think anytime you take on, and you don't want to say that they were reckless, but there's not another good word for it. When you're using taxpayers' money, to me, and this is my personal opinion, when you're using taxpayer money to take on something like that without putting that type of effort into it, that's borderline reckless. And I think, especially when you look at the past 2 decades in Massillon, some things, the decisions that were made that didn't turn out, and now you're almost, you hate to say stuck with it. Right. But let's face it, that third 9 on the golf course, that was a bad idea.
It was.
What are you going to do with it now? So with the hospital, I kind of see that same, you hate to call it a trend, but there's a lot of similarities as far as...
And it's unfortunate because, you see an editorial from our local newspaper that comes in and says, oh, no, if anybody brings this up in the election, it's going to backfire on there. This hospital deal's all worked out, and we've done the best thing for our city. And I'm like, we don't need newspapers that are going to cooperate with mistakes. We want newspapers, and I would address this, and I respect our local newspaper, but they need to be honest about things. It's okay to have an opinion,
Right.
but don't try to govern from an office in Canton,
Right.
because Canton is not our example.
Right.
Massillon has tried to follow Canton way too long, and we continue to try to follow Canton, including things like prettying up our downtown. These are Canton ideas. They're not our ideas. And it's time for us to realize we're a small town. We are Massillon, but Massillon has a proud tradition, and we are not followers, we are leaders. So at some point, we need to stop following what someone else is telling us to do and come up with our own set of ideas and begin to move forward and make Massillon what it's meant to be.
So, a little bit on the infrastructure. I had quite a bit of people asking me about the roads themselves, and we have a tax that would come to an end in your first term. I believe it was for 5 years, right? Is that something that you would pursue to renew or to get rid of?
I think when we talked about on the tax itself,
Right.
I think we need to take the whole picture.
Okay.
I mean, we've got street lamp levies now,
Street
and
fee, yeah.
sewer levies now, or fees that we've added on and so on.
Right.
We need to find out piece by piece what the citizens are paying, what are the taxpayers paying.
Right.
If those things need to be, they need to be.
Right.
But I think we're going to find out that we've got we can condense that down and make our tax code simple,
Right.
keep it fair. I don't hear anyone complaining about paying taxes to live in the city of Massillon.
Right.
I hear them complain about always adding this on, adding this park tax, adding this sewer
right.
tax. Okay, it's all a taxation, no matter if you call it a fee or what.
Right.
And so I think we have to look at everything, and that's why I say we may have to come back. I was talking to one of the gentlemen running for council. He said, I always thought we should be at 1.8% on our income tax. He said, but if we made it fair and had to go to 2% and make it a flat 2% income tax down the road and get rid of all these extra things, I said, that's the idea. That's negotiating. That's talking about it. That's simplifying it for
Right.
the people.
Sure.
So, yeah, we may have to stick with a 2% long-term income tax.
Right.
We're not going to cut off our nose to spite our face.
Right.
But we're going to make sure, but it's important how we distribute that money as well. Are we distributing that money fairly around the city? And when I say fairly, I mean, we've had conversations. Mm-hmm. Everybody's paying that tax.
Right.
Every area of the city deserves to be touched.
Right. And that, just off the top of my head, that list of roads that it's on the list this year, on the southwest side of Massillon, there's only 4 roads. And I'm not saying that those 4 roads don't need it. I'm not saying that every road on that list don't need it. I'm saying that as a city as a whole, that maybe that should be spread out maybe a little more evenly.
Yeah.
I mean, they can't do it all in one year. That's not realistic. But if you look at the streets that they picked, I think the southwest side has a lot of residents. I mean, it's not like it's a vast open area.
Right.
I think maybe a little bit more, and I don't, and this is going to sound bad, I work in the street department. I don't know how those streets are picked. I have no idea who picks them or if there's a grading scale or whatnot. So, but from what I'm hearing, the southwest side of Massillon's a little bit upset for how that's handled. I don't know if are you going, would you put something into place as far as to let people know, okay, that's why this street's picked and so many from each section?
We have to communicate, and I've always talked about, I don't believe politicians want to give us any more information than they have to.
Right.
We talk about, we've got deals A, B, and C. That means absolutely nothing to us.
Right.
So everything that we do has to be as transparent as possible. Now, the citizens don't want to know, they say, well, we've got a chart. I questioned the administration on the fixing of the sewers, and I'm going to use this for a little example. Hopefully it covers it. And I said, but wait a minute. You're saying you can buy a hospital for $1 and spend millions of dollars on that. But every time I call a council person or city hall, they tell me that you don't understand. We have 5,000 sewers in the city. Well, I know the number of sewers in the city. You don't have to keep telling me that. But what as a citizen now, this is before I decided to run for mayor.
Right.
As a citizen now, but I said, what I am concerned about? I've lived here and owned my home in University Village for 16 years. I sold it to my daughter. She's lived there for a year. And you know what sits in front of that house for the last 3 years? An orange barrel. that is several inches deeper into the ground every year. And I said, please don't tell me you could run a hospital and you can't replace sewer drains.
Right.
I will tell you, 45 days later, in University Village, the sewer drains were all completely fixed. So somewhere, some way, there was a miracle batch of money sitting there that they forgot to earmark. So yeah, we do need a system. They say there's a system in place. I think they said they were going to put online where the next storm drains are going to be fixed. I haven't seen that. I could be wrong about that.
Right.
But yeah, there needs to be a system of communication for the people, and it's very important that the people also participate and give input.
Right. And
don't hold your officials accountable.
Right. And that's something that through going to a few of the council meetings, I don't think that being a citizen is sort of a sideline sport. I'm a fan of people actually going to the meetings, or at least having a way to communicate it. You can watch it online, but to be there in person, that's the only way that you would be able to interact with those people. And I think in some ways Massillon lacks that a little bit. Unless with the hospital there was a good group there for a while, but then it kind of faded away.
A little bit for the reservoir.
Right, a little bit for the resi.
But yeah, in general, and I, it's funny, and this just popped into my mind as we were talking. I was going around collecting signatures, and I happened to be in University Village collecting signatures for my run for office. And I had a couple that I know, they're neighbors down the road from where I used to live, and they signed their paper and they said, you know what, we're going to support you because maybe we can not hate living in Massillon. And it took me back. Mm-hmm. University Village is a very nice neighborhood in Massillon.
Right.
And that whole area is. It really is. Mm-hmm. But, and I inquired further.
All right.
And they said the city just doesn't do anything for us. They don't care about us. They just want the next tax and the next fee. And if that's the attitude our citizens start to get, that's tough. Now, that's partially on the citizens,
right,
and partially on the government. I believe that.
Sure.
And I just think there's a different attitude because, Massillon can get fired up.
Right.
There's no doubt Massillon can get fired up and be a positive community.
Absolutely.
It's got some great things, They always tell us don't tie into football to the politics. I get that, but, I'm not a huge sports fan. And they're like, oh, you're not going to make mayor if you're not a football fan. I'm just not a big sports fan. But I've attended games. I went to the playoff games this year.
Yeah.
And I will tell you, the last time I attended, one of the council people said, you got to be kidding me. I said, the last time before this year I was at a Massillon football game, Chris Spielman was being scouted out.
It's a couple minutes ago.
And then, yeah, but there are people in Massillon. We are just there living our lives. But I love what football has brought. I brought a friend of mine over, 40-some year season ticket holder to Canton McKinley. He came over and he said, Jim, this town is amazing. Just this year.
Right.
He said, I've never been to one of their games. He said the whole air around here is just totally different.
Right.
And I said, that's exactly right, but that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why we can't take that excellence and build it further into our schools and take that further into our community.
Right.
It doesn't have to be built around football. That's a piece of it.
Right.
But we've got pride in Massillon.
Right.
And we've got, there are people out there with fantastic, innovative ideas in business. Entrepreneurship is not dead.
No. No, it's not.
It may be a small percentage of people. Maybe it's 0.5% of the people out there that come up with the really big ideas. And if you don't mind, I'm going to make a quick segue into my family as an example,
Sure.
if I may.
Yep.
And so let me just talk about my family. I think we even have a picture here that we can put up there, and just so everybody knows a little bit more of who I am. This is just us a year and a half ago up in Cleveland. My girls took me to the chocolate bar for my birthday. And so that was pretty cool. And we went up and did a little bit of shopping and so on up there and hung out. And I was amazed at this old hotel that's there and the shops that are inside of there. But of course, that's me there. And just directly to my left is my oldest daughter, Jessica. And this is the fun part of pointing out. Jessica went to college for a half a semester at Akron U.
Yeah.
And we said, Jessica, you got to try college. She said, Dad, Mom, this is not for me.
Right.
So we encouraged her to finish her semester,
right.
And she did. And we said, well, what are you going to do? She said, well, I've I like doing these nails and hair at the time.
Right.
Long story short, Jessica dedicated herself to her craft. She was years before this. Now, right in front of her is my grandson Isaiah. Jessica is a single mom.
Right.
She's never been married. The father's really never heavily been involved in my grandson's life. But the cool thing is I've got to spend a ton of time with him.
Yeah.
But so Isaiah comes along, and Jessica went down one day. Her friends told her, go down and apply for food stamps. And she went down. She had her job.
Right.
She went down and applied for food stamps, and they turned her down. They said, you make too much money, even though it wasn't a lot of money at the time.
Right.
She came home, and I remember her in her kitchen. The home, incidentally, she owns now.
Mm-hmm.
She came up to the kitchen counter. I was standing there. She said, Dad, they turned me down for food stamps. I said, that's great. She said, what do you mean? I said, now, take your skill. You have a skill. Mm-hmm. Now, you can either just keep applying for welfare-type items. Right. You have a choice in life, or you can do something with your skills. Mm-hmm. I will tell you now, this day, she's been in it for 10 years now. Isaiah's he's going to turn 8 next month.
Yeah.
And she has 6 employees. She runs a nail salon called the Nail Bar over on Fulton Road.
Right.
And she operates her own business there with 6 employees, is doing well. She was able to buy our home off of us a little over a year ago.
Wow.
And so she owns a home in University Village, and she's fully financially capable of taking care of her and her son.
Right.
Some people want to complain about, I use a lot of examples of her, some people want to complain about Obamacare or the ACA. Mm-hmm. I said, wait a minute, my 2 girls benefited because they were able to stay on insurance till 26 years old.
Right.
And also my my grandson benefited from the expansion of Medicaid in Ohio.
Right.
And he was able to be insured under the Buckeye plan until my daughter got on her feet at 27 years old. She went out, she buys her own health insurance, she takes care of her own bills.
Right.
So there are some government interventions that are okay.
Right.
It's just a matter of using them for a step up rather than always relying on them.
Absolutely.
My daughter next to that's Jessica and Isaiah. And the next to that is my daughter Elizabeth. She happens to be a legislative aide at the State House. She does have a degree from the University of Mount Union. She has a double major in comparative government, Japanese studies, and she'll get on me because I got that wrong somewhere along the way.
Right.
But she spent 2.5 years of her life teaching English. She worked for the Japanese government for 2 years. She's back here, could not find a job in Massillon or Canton, wanted to come back to the area, ended up working in Columbus. So again, it's like a real life example of all the things put together we're talking about. But she does a great job. She ran my campaign for state representative, and you ask who kind of encouraged me to run for office. Right. She was my final phone call before I decided to run for state representative.
Really?
And to solidly get involved. And, this is a 25-year-old daughter at the time. Right. And I can tell you, we don't see eye to eye on everything.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, she said, Dad, I'm calling you. I got to tell you, I'm not calling you as my father. I'm calling you as someone I've watched for all my life. And I see how you make decisions, I see how you think things out, and I see how you take things fairly and make a quality decision. She said, we don't have a lot of that. It may surprise you. We don't have a lot of that in government. She said, now I'm asking you to run for state representative. Right. Well, those same principles apply for running for mayor of Massillon. Sure. Nothing has changed there. Still the principles lie. So she actually was the final one that convinced me to get involved. She said, you've talked about it all your life. You're qualified. You need to step out and do it. Wow. So that's a huge endorsement from a 25-year-old daughter.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me jump down real quick, and I apologize if I'm taking too long. You tell me to get moving.
No.
In front of Elizabeth there is my oldest. He is my son, J.D. We've been calling him J.D. since before the day he was born. He's James Daniel II. Okay. J.D. actually, you could see he is sitting in a wheelchair. Right. J.D. he was born with cerebral palsy. Okay. He was born 2 months premature. So he was a honeymoon baby, and I'll never forget, 7 months after we were married, I placed my wife went into fetal distress and was taken to Altman Hospital. And I never will forget making the call to my mother-in-law in Youngstown. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mother-in-law's words. She said, that baby better be 2 months premature or I'm breaking both your legs when I get there. So that's kind of the old-fashioned America right there. Right. Oh, Polish lady, and my father-in-law was Slovak, so they were pretty set in their ways. Yeah. And my wife, of course, Sue, we've been married this fall. We will have been married 34 years. Wow. And we met in 1985 at Cathedral Life Church over on 38th Street. I was an usher, and she was visiting. She was just getting ready to move back to Youngstown. and I had just moved back to the area after being gone for a few months.
Right.
And so we just got together over a period of time. Some mutual friends of ours introduced us, and we hit it off, and the rest is history. And interesting little tidbit, we got engaged July 4th of 1985 on what used to be the little walkway across the creek by the dam at the Resi.
Yeah.
Before they had the new track and everything put up.
Right.
We were actually standing there, and we got engaged on that little bridge in the Resi. So that was kind of a cool little tidbit from 1985. Sure. But she is a med tech. She works in the lab at Altman Hospital.
Oh, okay.
So that's what she did when I met her. When the kids were young, she worked some part-time jobs so she could be a stay-at-home mom.
Right.
And then, of course, she's been back for probably 10 years now, and that's what she does.
So that's sort of a very broad spectrum as far as your family goes.
It is.
That
it's exciting because it's exciting because we kind of cover. I call us truly the all-American family.
Right.
You know, all the issues, the positives and the negatives of single motherhood,
right.
biracial children with my grandson, and that's okay to talk about. I mean,
right.
I talk about it with him. He's 7 years old.
Right.
Because I told him, I said, I don't ever want to hear that for an excuse why he doesn't perform.
Right.
And so we just cover all the issues. We've got college education. We've got non-college educated. You know, we've got professionals. We've got entrepreneurs.
Right.
And I think we're, you know, my daughter gets mad. I'm like, sometimes life just picks you. She's like, that's not a very good thing. You're supposed to pick your own life. I said, no, but sometimes
you're just
life
wired,
picks you.
Right. You're wired a certain way.
And it's exciting,
right.
the history and the diversity of all that in every way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I think, you know what? We didn't cover the reservoir.
We did not.
Briefly. Do you want to touch on it, or?
Well, I'll touch on it.
Okay.
And again, it's not about a gripe session, because let me bring it back into all of this stuff we're talking about. The reservoir, first of all, it did not have to end up where it is today.
Right.
There was plenty of warning, and we've all talked about that.
Right.
We have citizens that have done research, and I'm proud to say that some of them are some groups are supporting my candidacy for mayor.
Right.
Because they realize we had opportunities to deal with this. And current administration included, let's face it, 7 years as mayor, 8 years on council before that. It's not like you can say it was walked into blindly.
Right.
And we've been getting these notices since 91. So this is a problem again. We let it sit on the back burner until it became a big issue. And that pattern of things is what truly concerns me. But all the things we're talking about are symptoms of what I believe is our greatest problem. And we're going to jump back to, we don't have proper economic development. I'm not talking about tax cuts and trying to get the next Amazon warehouse here. You know, I hurt some people's feelings because I tell them, you know what, guys? I'm pretty sure Microsoft and Amazon and Google, I don't think they're looking to come to Massillon, Ohio.
Right.
Why would they? It's not to hurt anybody's feeling.
Right.
Where is their workforce? Where's the pool they're going to pull from?
Sure.
But you know what? We let a company like Cytrain with 12 employees that are involved in there. They're now writing software and so on for development and so on. We had them right here in downtown Massillon, and we chased them away because we took on a potato chip headquarters. And that's good too.
Right.
Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But we let them walk away. They were like, give us a reason to stay. They looked at downtown Canton, in all fairness, and they're like, we're not coming here. What are they providing for us here?
Right.
So they went to Belton Village, where it has that more variety of restaurants and so on and so forth.
Right.
But we let them walk away, and we didn't have to.
Right. There wasn't. They didn't offer any type of incentive to stay or any.
There was not. They made it clear they were looking for a place.
Right.
And yet, Belton Village is where they ended up. So again, it's a small, but it's a tech company that ended up with 12 jobs that are just not here, probably not coming back. So those are the opportunities we just have to be aware of.
Sure.
And nobody's perfect. There's going to be mistakes made. There's going to be businesses missed and so on.
Right.
But I just think the side things that we're dealing with, the loss of a hospital, the putting the burden of a golf course on the taxpayers, the resi not being dealt with. It's a long chain of events. The water park that came up that just never fit our area, that we actually put effort into. It's just a long thing. The problem is we don't have the economic development.
Right.
If we can get the entrepreneurs fired up, and I say and I mentioned it earlier, there's a pool of people out there that have unbelievable ideas.
Right.
And if you give them a little nudge, wouldn't it be nice if the government could just give you a little nudge in a friendly direction and you launch something that turns into, maybe it's something small.
Right.
Maybe you only have one employee for the rest of your life.
Right.
But what if it turns into something big?
Right.
And that was fostered right here. That's the way America was built.
Right.
And I think we can get back to that. And we need to deal with that economic side and encouraging entrepreneurs and help push people forward. Become a partner with them, not for taxpayer dollars.
Right.
Stop it with the tax abatements and the taxpayer dollars. I don't want to race other cities to the bottom.
Right. Right.
And that's what tax abatements are. They're a race to the bottom.
Right.
Because I learned one thing. If you sell anything in business for the cheapest price, you will always be beaten and lose that customer by the next guy that comes along with the next cheapest price. So if you give a 10-year tax abatement, that company's going to suck that up. And you know what they're going to do in 10 years? I've been thinking about moving out of town with my potato chip factory or whatever.
Right.
But that's one that's realistic for us that we understand.
Right.
Well, we're going to have to give a tax abatement. That's the first response.
Right.
That's not the first response.
Right.
But you don't understand. This is what we have to offer you. This is why it's better for you to stay here.
Right.
Let us help you in this way and that way.
Right.
And I just think it's a different way of doing business.
Yeah. One last thing. I'm going to bring the number up. If for some reason somebody wants to call in or has questions, the number is 330-809-1924. I wanted to touch on this downtown project.
Okay.
For this show, because I would love to have you back on and pick your brain some more.
Anytime. I'll be here anytime you call me.
We have this downtown upgrade beautification type project.
Imagine, Massillon.
Right? Is that something that you would pursue, or is it something that you would leave to the individual business owners? Because I believe that's that whole, what is it going to be, from what, 2nd or 3rd Street to the Viaduct or something to that effect?
I don't think I think you'll realize my answer pretty quickly.
Right.
I am about as much free enterprise as possible, as much as individual innovation as we can have, as much entrepreneurship. If there's to be imagination, let's let the entrepreneurs have that piece of it. If we have to fix water lines and utilities and things like that, I get it.
Right.
Then replace that with a nice sidewalk and a nice street. I get that. That's not what I'm talking about.
Right.
But trying to develop some type of, first of all, Massillon's downtown is only so large.
Right.
It's not a big city. It's not Cleveland. It's not Pittsburgh. It's not San Francisco.
Right.
We all know that.
Right.
So we've got to be very careful. Let the entrepreneurs build that city. Let them have their individual creativity. For once, I use the example. If somebody comes along and wants to put in a boutique and they want to have a pink storefront with purple polka dots,
Right.
what's it going to hurt?
Right.
You know what happens if they don't get enough business with their pink storefront with purple polka dots?
It goes away.
Yeah, they repaint it. They change it.
They change
Maybe
it.
the
Right.
boutique leaves and the next coffee shop comes in.
Right.
Or the next specialty retailer comes in and he does it entire. Maybe that works. Or maybe they adjust. That's what entrepreneurs and businesses do.
Right.
Let them foster. Let them build ideas. Let them experiment. And let them build just like they did this country to begin with.
Right.
And like they did Massillon to begin with. Let them continue. Let them begin to rebuild Massillon.
Sure.
Let's give them all the services they need. I don't think we need all matching storefront and cutesy this and cutesy that.
Right.
That will come in time.
Sure.
But once again, it's all side effects. Once we have economic development and growth, that's why I think we can get to a pretty much a flat tax or a flat straight percentage and stop adding in all these levies and separate things.
Right.
Let's get that back. Let's get all those things back under the control of city council as much as we can and
Right.
hold our politicians accountable for that. But let's let the entrepreneurs do what entrepreneurs do best. Build business.
Make stuff.
Make stuff.
Right.
Create something. Service something. There's tons of opportunity out there. Opportunity is not gone. In
Right.
2011, somebody said, "Are you kidding me? Do you know how many hot dog carts started?"
Oh, we have an incoming call.
And so, okay. We need the headphones there?
Yes, sir. Caller, go ahead.
Hello?
Hello?
Is your show over?
No, it's on right now, brother.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm watching it. It's kind of
You're on
I'm
live.
behind. Yeah. Okay. Well, listen.
Okay.
I've been watching the show, and I've got to be honest. I don't know, 20, 25 minutes before I started watching. I guess what I'd like to know is, and I'm hearing a lot about the entrepreneurship, and you know, and Josh, you know as well as I do. And by the way, my name is Tim. I work with Josh in the street department. And I work on the streets, and I'm seeing these roads deteriorate every day. I mean, what's the plan? I mean, to catch up, I guess is the big question. I mean, we bought some new equipment, but we in the street department, are we going to utilize that? Is there a plan
If I can,
as far as our infrastructure?
Tim, if I can address that, just this is going to be a little bit in general terms, but keep in mind, and you did miss mentioned you missed maybe the first 25 minutes. Part of this is prioritizing what the city does. Part of the problem over the years has been we're involved in things that we probably shouldn't be involved in, and that we should let private enterprise handle. So therefore, our resources are divided into the taking care of those things and maintaining those things, including our financial resources. So everything is on the table. Everything has to be on the table for any new administration coming in. We can keep on going the way we're going, and we'll keep stumbling and fumbling, and we'll repair a few streets, and we'll do this and we'll do that. But at some point, everything has to be on the table and looked at, and we've got to start eliminating those things that are distracting us from making sure we have good streets. I think that's one of the primary jobs of this city, beyond fire and police protection. We have to adjust, and we have to eliminate waste. And when I say that, it's not just financial waste. It's what are we tying up our time and resources on? How are we going to change that? So yes, there is catching up to do, and it is going to be a process. And I'll tell you what, when was the last time you heard a politician say, you know what, we may have something in our infrastructure. We may have a street that we may not need.
Right.
And they never propose. Once they build it, they love to build things because they love to put their names on plaques. They love to put their names on this and that. So they will build something, and they never take into consideration. I hear it time and time and time again at every level of government. They don't allow for the maintenance of that item that's being built, and they do not allow for the eventual replacement, because it's great. It's a street that's going to last for 25 years, or some other project is going to last for 25 years. But we've never allocated, and we've never allowed for that complete replacement to happen. And so we're always in this cycle of trying to catch up and trying to find some way to juggle the books to make things happen. And I think it's a matter of prioritizing every piece, including the tax code, but every piece of the city step by step. And we're going to look. If anybody thinks I have all the answers out there, I do not. Let me make it clear. If you're voting for me for that. But there are things that can be done step by step, and we're going to find the best of the best to work with us. And one thing is, we need to start fixing roads and fixing them properly. Mm-hmm. This surface coating is a bunch of trash, and it's a. Can I say it's a lie? I guess that's a lie. It's just not lasting.
Right.
And we need to fix roads properly so they last their proper term, and then we can start getting a grip on this thing if that helps out.
Does that answer your question, brother?
It sure does.
Outstanding.
Well, and I want to, and I don't know, we've talked about this. The city has grown. I mean, even I've been with the city for 19 years and working for the city for 19 years. And when I first started, as far west as we went was just a little bit past 32nd Street Northwest. Now we got Lanedale Allotment and Canyon Creek and Simple Reserve just out in the northwest side. Also, when I first started with the street department, there was like 16 or 18 guys working in that department alone. Since then, our department's gotten smaller and the city's gotten bigger. So the amount of work that's expected from, from the citizens of the city, and I've always said, they have a perfect reason to complain. And that was the reason why I wanted to stress the question, is because, we are way behind. So
Right.
thank you for your answer, and thank you for your time.
I appreciate
Have a
it,
good
Tim.
one.
Thank you.
We at work, Tim and myself, we discuss the operations of the city a lot, and that's a growing trend, like Third Street Northwest. You've been down there,
Right.
okay? Right now, they're sending people down there to patch that. It's on the list to be paved, but it's what? We're not even in March, and with the amount of freeze thaw we're going to have, people have to remember patch is temporary.
Right. Right.
No matter when you do it or how you put it in there, it will always be temporary. And that area down there, one of the things that we were discussing at work, to get it to that time period this summer when it's going to be paved, they're going to send 2 guys down there. They're going to do 3 tons in the morning. They're going to shovel 3 tons in the afternoon. They're going to spend the better part of 2 weeks down there. And by the time they finish, they'll have to start over again. Versus going down, getting just standard hot mix, back dragging it with the loader, rolling it, and you're probably going to get maybe 4 or 5 months. You'll get to spring, summer to when they're going to grind it. It's the maintenance that we do now is reactionary.
Right.
If you call in enough, you'll see us. And for us, it's frustrating because, like, I was talking to the lady that lets me use the studio, and she said, you guys will go out somewhere, but then you leave and you don't come back. And I was like, well, it's common
Right.
that, especially in snow or patching, you'll work in an area for a certain amount of time. They'll call you on the radio. They'll say, we need you over here. And you don't ever come back. And that type of maintenance, along with, like you said, skim coating, stuff like that, it doesn't last, and it's not productive.
Right.
And for the guys doing the work, we have a lot of issue with that. And it, especially when I first started, you had a workforce that was almost twice the size, and you were able to do things and do it correctly,
Right.
and you didn't have to go back. So looking forward, especially with the tax, it bothers me and a lot of the guys I work with to have that tax and to know that that's not going to work.
Right.
And you when you try to stress those ideas to the powers that be, it's you hate. I don't even know how to say it without getting in trouble. It's not. I don't want to say it falls on deaf ears, but those things will not happen.
Right.
Due to how things are done and operated. So when he talks about that, and myself and other guys, another guy asked me today to ask you about painting lines. Okay, we used to, every summer, we would paint 21, Lincoln Way, whatnot. Now, unless it's a road that's getting paved, it's rare that we paint anything.
Right.
They wanted to know if those were things that would be pursued in the future. So that whole maintenance of the infrastructure as a whole there's a lot of questions.
Well, and let's tie it back into the resi.
Right.
It was a series of years of not doing anything.
Right.
So it becomes a management style. I actually heard someone say, we changed, we had an administration, we changed faces, and we found out we didn't change style of management.
Right.
And that is a large concern. And there's a reason I'm not running for mayor of Massillon because I need to build a name for myself.
Right.
We've talked about this before.
Right.
I have a very comfortable lifestyle. Mm-hmm. My wife has a solid job. I have a great career that's super fulfilling.
Right.
But the question is, can we do something better for the people?
Right.
And I've kept that slogan. We use that slogan: people, progress, and prosperity. Because first of all, it's about the people. But the thing is, the people that work within the city, we don't want the street department to run the city of Massillon.
Right.
But we want the street department to run the best street department in the state.
Right.
And so it's going to take the people there. You know what it takes.
Right.
You know, I know what it takes to put out a good hot dog and to keep people coming back to a little hot 4x8 hot dog cart.
Right.
I get it because that's what I do. I know what it takes to sell. I know what customer service it takes, and so on. I know what it takes to get them to spend $3 on a hot dog. They can buy 2 for $2.50 across the street. But it's not everything being equal.
Right.
It's a service. It's a style. It's something unique.
Right.
So I want to talk to the specialist when it comes to the street department, when it comes to the water department, when it comes to police and fire. We want everyone involved. We have a lot of trouble hiring policemen right now.
Yes.
We've just increased the pay a little bit, I guess, now with the new with the new union contract. But we have a lot of trouble. And my question is, it's kind of like the old school teacher days. Yeah, maybe they didn't make as much, but I'll tell you, men and women will work for a place that has purpose.
Right.
There's an attitude. They'll be attracted to a place. It all depends on what the atmosphere is around them. And if they believe they can truly make a difference for people and make a difference in this life.
Right.
Every issue we deal with, if we can help people find meaning in what they do, including the street department, you guys got to get sick and tired of throwing a patch in these things and then coming back a week later and they're back. What's the satisfaction in that?
Right.
But to see a street properly paved,
Right.
to see it lasting, and you haven't been back there for quite some time,
Right.
doing any maintenance on that doesn't need to be done, or coming back and just doing striping
Right.
because it's worn down because everything's lasting so well. There's some pride in that, and if we keep sucking that pride out of our city, that's kind of the big thing we've been talking about here today.
Right.
It's about bringing that pride back to the city and let those people that are best at what they do, let them be the best at what they do.
Right.
It's not a new concept. It's not my concept. It's one that works.
Right.
But we always go back to, well, government's got the best ideas. The politicians have the best ideas. No, they don't, folks. They're politicians.
Yeah. So I think this would be a great place to wrap up the first show.
Absolutely.
I would love to have you back on. I think we're at an hour and a half right now.
Okay, yeah.
But
Sorry if we bored you folks out there.
no,
This has been great.
One of the things that I like about this is there isn't like if you watch the news or whatnot, there's a 2-minute clip.
Right.
You don't debate anything in 2 minutes.
Right.
You don't. There's no. So with this, I just hit the button and let it go until it runs its course.
Do we got a minute? I can put a plug in for a couple people.
Absolutely.
I'm going to tell you something. I'm also proud to be running, and I'll mention more in a future show.
Okay.
But I've got a couple of council people in particular. Now, one is that I want to mention. One is Jim Therrett running for Ward 2. Okay. And, of course, Lee stepped aside and we had a meeting and stepped aside and allowed Jim Therrett to run because he was so impressed with his candidacy. Mm-hmm. But Jim Therrett, and also I had a conversation recently with Mike Gregg, who is the incumbent in Ward 3.
Right.
And his wife, both of the couples. And I talked with them, and I was so impressed. Neither of us three are born and raised in Massillon. And yet, the cool thing we had in common, we decided that this was where we wanted to raise our families.
Right.
And we moved here. We're excited. We like when I hear them talk, they like their neighborhoods. They like their neighbors. We want to live in Massillon. We want to see Massillon succeed.
Right.
And I'll tell you what, guess what, folks? You don't have to live in Massillon for 70 years to serve in your city.
Right.
And I've encouraged people, tried to get people to run. Mm-hmm. We do have a primary in Ward 1. That's the only primary on the Republican side.
Right.
Between Sarita Cunningham and Mark Lombardi.
Yeah.
Again, Mark Lombardi's a guy that just wants to serve. He's been involved and he wants to serve. I don't endorse in primaries, mm-hmm. but I'm excited that we have two candidates willing to run in the same ward, in the same party.
Right.
We should have that in every election, right. Every time.
Absolutely.
Both parties and even independents. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to go on any longer than that, but I'm excited about some people we have coming up on the ballot as well.
So I'm trying to think. What was Mike?
Michael Snee is running in Ward 6. Very excited, young family man, and in a supervisory management position with the trucking company he works with and so on. Great guy. Very excited about that. So let's see, we covered Ward 1, 2. You got a comment or something there?
Well, yeah. The show, there's a guy, Ed. Okay. Ed Peterson watches the show a lot, and Ed is either the show jester, or he asks a very pointed question.
Yes.
But he's being the jester now. He wants to know if you like tacos. Ed is a taco fan.
Ed, let me tell you something. I'm going to let you see something. Ed, I like it all, brother. Margaritas is my second home downtown. Just so you know. Tacos anytime, Ed. If you call me, I'll be there.
All right. Well, I think that's going to be it for this time. But I'm sure that we will do this again. This is
Absolutely.
I think the area here is working well. I think getting more candidates on. Again, this platform is open to all candidates, regardless of party, whoever. I sent out emails to the mayor and the current council members. I don't know if they use the emails on their website, but those were the ones that I used.
That would be sad if they don't.
Yeah, well, yeah. So if you're a current council person, the mayor, check your email. Check the spam folder, too, because every once in a while the emails get goofy as far as where they're delivered to. So, but that's all I have. You got anything else?
I think we're good. I'm looking forward to coming back. I'll keep my slate open anytime you need me. Want to talk about anything? Let's do it. And I'm honored to be in your new studio. I'm excited.
First one.
This was a great format.
You know what? We're going to get an area to where people can sign.
I wasn't that crazy, remember, about the impeach Nixon right over my head. I'm just doing politics. I don't want to think about all that stuff right now.
So, anyway, that's all I got for this evening. If you like these shows, hit that thumbs up. If you don't like the shows, hit the thumbs down. Let me know why. I would love to hear your thoughts. All criticism is welcome. And if you really like these videos, hit the subscribe button along with the bell. That way YouTube knows to notify you that new content is up on the channel. Until next time, stay sharp, keep a tight shot, group.
Rock on.